This article from the Daily Caller, my friends over at the Daily Caller, was interesting to me about Maryland. Maryland schools guidelines claim kids have a right to keep in-school gender identities private. I was like, that's interesting. So let's look at the article first, and then we'll get to exactly what it says. And there's two components of this, okay? There's one component, which is that kids have the right to keep their in-school identity. So how they identify in school, private, separate from their parents. Their parents don't have to know. That's number one. We're going to get into that. And the second one deals with bathrooms, okay? So let's hold on that one. Let's start with the gender identities. Let's read. Maryland Public School District asserts kids have the right to keep their in-school gender identities private from parents. The guidelines vow to, quote, respect the right of students to keep their gender identity or transgender status private and confidential, including parents who do not affirm the child's perceived gender identity. Educators are told not to contact a student's parent or guardian, can you imagine, until they speak with the student to ascertain the level of support the student either receives or anticipates receiving from home. So you send your kid to school, say your kid's in 9th grade, I'm going to make up a grade. That kid has a separate life at school, has a separate identity in the sense that maybe you have a little boy that, you sent to school as a boy, identifies as a girl at school, and the school acknowledges that, treats that child like a girl, does not pick up the phone to call you first, talks to your child, who is a minor, last I checked, okay? The child's tax dollars aren't going to fund that education. Yours are as the parent. That child gets consulted. And then maybe you get looped in if you're supportive, if they deem you as supportive. Interesting way to spend your tax dollars at that school. Okay, let's continue. Staff members are required to call transgender students by their identified name and/or pronouns, and to the extent possible, school personnel will make efforts to maintain the confidentiality of the student's transgender status. The guidelines specifically tell educators that unless a parent, you listening, mom and dad? Unless a parent affirms a student's new identity, to continue to use the student's legal name and pronouns when talking with the parents. So you see this game that's going on? You are in the dark. And this particular school, this is the Montgomery County Public School District, their guidelines, unless you go along, you're just kept in the dark. Right? So you've got a kid that's growing up with a whole identity you don't even know about. Maybe among their friends, among their teachers, among their guidance counselor. I remember once talking to a guidance counselor in New York that was very proud to tell me, oh yes, I have students come to me and they tell me, about their gender identity. And I don't tell their parents because I don't know if it's a safe space at home. And I just thought to myself, wow, you're doing your job horribly. Okay, now remember, I'm saying this all of this stuff and having all these conversations from the lens of somebody who didn't only teach these kids, but was a student advisor to these kids and was a 9th and then 10th grade dean to these kids. I can tell you that this would never happen. Parents were looped in every single time. Anything that involved something medical, that involved something that centered around the health and wellness of that child, the parent was looped in. And I was quick to discover if there was any issue at home. You got to sift that out too. Of course, guidance counselors get involved sometimes. You never know. Sometimes the situation at home isn't ideal. They have to be looped in. That's a parent, right? This is a child. You don't know. A child could be saying one thing. Maybe that's not what's going on at home at all. These aren't adults. These are children. Okay?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So what happens if, say, a child is getting backlash at home and, they don't want to share that? Well, how does it, what does the guidance counselor do to avoid the kid getting hurt at home or
Well, at some point, I mean, if there is legitimately an issue going on at home where there's any violence in the home or there's any abuse, emotional or otherwise, in the home, and the child comes and vocalizes that, then there's usually a third party that's brought in. But oftentimes what it is now that you see happening a lot is there's just a different way to approach it. Like the parents may not be supportive of their third grader waking up one day and saying, oh, my teacher read me a book about boys and I'm a boy. They're not supportive of that. They don't think that their third grader is able to make that informed decision, so they're not supportive. And now what you have is teachers and administrators kind of battling parents and saying, we're going to shut you out. But of course, if there's an issue of a legitimate problem in the home where that is not a safe home, I mean, that should be looked into regardless, not just as it relates to gender, but across the board. So at that point, you'd have a third party. And I always did. That's why I kind of introed it and said, I always kind of assess that situation. It's very easy to see the dynamic. All you have to do is sit children with their parents, and you can often assess that dynamic that's going on. You can bring a guidance counselor in, you can bring a third party in. You have a lot of tools at your disposal, but there shouldn't be a battle. You have a good home, you have a loving home. This can't be a battle between that home and an administration that is catering to what a child wants and Xing the parent out because the parent doesn't abide by their set of principles, shall we say. If you like the short clip, you can catch another one here, or you can catch the full episode right here.